my eyes 100 questions were racing through my head. Who wrote this note? Where did the key belong? I closed the chest and took the note and the key to my room. My heart was full of curiosity and a bit of fear, but I was determined to uncover the mystery behind that note. I couldn't sleep all night. I had no idea everything was about to change. The next morning, when the first light of morning came, my eyes were still tired. I had spent most of the night thinking about the key and the note from the chest. Maybe it was just an old keepsake or some kind of family joke, but something inside me was telling me this was much more important. When I went downstairs for breakfast, my Uncle Jack was in the kitchen making coffee. He gave me his usual laid-back smile and said good morning for a second. I thought about showing him the key, but I stopped. Something inside me told me not to say anything. Instead, I asked, have there always been old things like that in this house? Jack took a sip of his coffee and squinted at me. This house is full of secrets, he said almost jokingly. But for a moment his smile seemed to fade. That slight change in his expression only made me more curious. What kind of secrets? I pressed. He just shrugged and took his coffee out to the porch. He was trying to drop the subject, but I wasn't about to let it go. I went back to my room for a while and looked at the key again. What kind of story could be hidden behind the small metal key? I decided to go back to the room where I found the chest to check the wall. As for any hidden compartments or anything unusual on the wall, I noticed small cracks forming a shape that looked like some kind of panel. My heart started racing. I had found something using a screwdriver. I carefully opened what looked like a panel in the wall behind. It was a small compartment with an old dusty box inside. I used the key to unlock the box and opened the lid. Inside there was an old pocket watch, a photograph, and another note. The photo showed a young man and woman. The man was my Uncle Jack, but who was the woman? I had never heard about him being with anyone. On the back of the photo, it said, always with you, Lillian. The note was even more mysterious. It said, I have half forgotten Leland, but this secret must stay buried with us. As I stood there trying to make sense of what I was holding, the door to the room suddenly opened. Jack was standing there. His face had a much harsher expression than usual. Emily, where did you find that box? He asked, his voice more serious than I'd ever heard before. Why didn't you tell me? Who is this woman? Jack, who is Lillian? I asked, trying to defend myself, but Jack suddenly seemed angry. You weren't supposed to find this, he said, but then for a moment his anger turned into deep sadness. I'll explain everything to you, but not now. All you need to know is this: don't ever lose that key. Jack left the room, leaving me in a whirlwind of questions and confusion. As soon as he left, the complicated feelings in my heart turned into an even deeper curiosity. No matter what, I wasn't going to let this go. I felt like finding that box wasn't a coincidence. I had to find out who Lillian was. I carefully put the photo into my bag and hid the box back where I found it at dinner. Jack acted as calm as usual, but when our eyes met, I could sense attention behind the relaxed mask he was wearing. That's when I got an idea. Instead of asking him direct questions, I could approach it more subtly. Uncle, I found some old photos. How much do you know about the history of this house? I asked in an innocent tone. Jack paused. For a moment his eyebrow slightly raised and it looked like he was about to say something, but then he just said, this house is full of deep family stories. You already know as much as you need to. And he changed the subject. That answer didn't satisfy me. It was obvious Jack was hiding something, so I decided to investigate on my own. Late at night, after Jack went to his room, I quietly approached the locked drawer he always point shut with his key. I carefully picked the lock and found a stack of old letters and a journal inside. I quickly started flipping through the journal. The handwriting was Jack's. The first few pages described an ordinary life story, but after a few pages everything changed. Jack was writing about a deep love he had with a woman named Lillian. He described how their love disrupted not only the balance in the family but also Lillian's own life. On one of the last pages it said Lillian is gone with age. A departure. A piece of me died too, but no one can know why she left. If they do, this house and our family will be cursed forever. My hands were trembling. Who was Lillian and why didn't Jack even want to speak her name? Just as I was closing the journal, I froze at the sound of a creak in the room. Jack was standing in the doorway. His face was filled with anger, but there was also a kind of helplessness in his eyes. He saw me holding the journal. Emily, you need to leave this place now, he said quietly but firmly. Whatever you found, leave it where you found it. This secret goes to the grave with me. But I didn't stop. Uncle, this secret affects me too. Who was Lillian? Why does she matter so much? I asked, refusing to back down. Jack took a deep breath. Fine, he said, like he had given up. But what I'm about to tell you can't leave this room. Lillian was the woman I loved when I was young, but our story wasn't just about love. Lillian discovered something that this family has been protecting for generations, and that secret ended her life. The emotions on Jack's face made it seem like the memories he had buried were all rising to the surface. His voice trembled as he continued. Lillian had to make a choice, but that choice tore her away from me. Since that day, I've lived to protect this secret. As he spoke, I could feel the deep pain in every word he said. Seeing him so vulnerable shocked me. Jack had always been strong, determined, and guarded about his feelings, but the man standing in front of me now had completely let his mask down. Jack, I whispered softly, why are you carrying this secret all by yourself? It's destroying you. He took a deep breath and stepped closer to me. His eyes were locked onto mine. Some burdens can't be shared, Emily. This secret is mine to bear alone. But I couldn't let him face this loneliness. I took a step closer. No one has to be alone, I said, my voice answering the sadness in his eyes. In that moment, the air between us shifted. The silence grew heavy, as if words were no longer enough. The hard expression on Jack's face softened into something more complicated. Without realizing it, I had clenched my hands tightly together, but he gently reached for them. His touch was surprisingly tender. Emily, he murmured, but didn't finish the sentence. I moved a little closer. A wave of emotion rose inside me, a mix of curiosity and an unexplainable pull. My heart was pounding as I watched every expression on his face. He hesitated for a moment, his fingers gently wrapping around mine. I felt our gaze deepen. This moment was both comforting and filled with complexity. When I realized he had stepped even closer, the space between us disappeared completely. But this closeness wasn't just physical, it was as if years of emotional weight were silently shared in that instant. Jack took a deep breath and stepped back. This isn't right, he said, his voice low but firm. I can't put you in danger. Everything with Lillian, it ruined other people's lives. Yes, but I didn't back down. Jack, no matter what happens, I won't let you be alone. If this secret affects my life, then we need to face it together. In that moment, I understood that the bond between us wasn't just about secrets, it was woven from the deepest vulnerabilities of being human. Jack took a deep breath and closed his eyes for a moment, as if he was fighting an inner battle, but then he stepped closer to me, and the tension on his face melted into a gentle expression. Emily, he said, his veil eyes barely above a whisper and fragile. I don't want anything about tonight to feel wrong, but sometimes what's right or wrong matters less than resisting what we feel. In that moment, I felt the space between us completely disappear. When my hands rested on his shoulder, it was as if I had found a long-lost piece of myself. Jack's fingertips brushed lightly against the side of my face, not to explain, but to express the turmoil he was feeling. Time seemed to stand still. Our breathing blended into a quiet but intense rhythm. Jack seemed to pull back for a moment, but then, caught in the shadow of his doubts, he looked at me more closely. We should make tonight unforgettable, but nothing about it should turn into regret by morning, he said, his voice steady yet full of emotion. The bond between us had deepened beyond what words could express. In his touch, there was a sense of trust and closeness that words could never convey. This wasn't just about sharing the weight of the past, but about wielding a moment shaped by our faith in each other. Jack's fingers slowly moved from my hands to my shoulders. His touch was not only gentle but protective. I felt myself surrounded by the emotional space he carefully created, like a quiet breeze, soft but unstoppable. Hours seemed to dissolve into the depth of what we felt. Our connection transcended physical closeness, becoming a profound spiritual unity. The silence between us was no longer empty, it became a melody of shared understanding. That night, I stepped beyond the walls where Jack kept his secrets. I felt like I was not only sharing his fears, but also his dreams and pain. His emotional vulnerability brought me closer to him, making the bond we shared even more unbreakable. Jack's hands lingered on my shoulders for a moment, moment the conflict on his face revealed both a sense of relief as if he wanted to believe being close to me was the right choice and a tangle of self-doubt questioning every step he took. Emily, I need to protect you, he said, his voice carrying a mix of resolve and quiet surrender, but his eyes spoke more than his words ever could as his fingertips gently moved from my shoulders down to my arms. A wave of warmth rippled through me. His touch wasn't just an expression of closeness, but also a silent reassurance. In that moment, it felt like the world had gone quiet, leaving only Jack and me. Jack, I said, my gaze locked on his. You've been hiding so much to protect yourself, but maybe some secrets feel less as frightening when they're shared. Jack didn't answer. Instead, he leaned in slowly, his hand resting softly against my cheek. In his touch, I felt not just attraction, but also a deep sense of regret. The sadness in his eyes was the mark of burdens he had carried for years, yet that sadness was beginning to give way to quiet acceptance. I leaned closer to him, the face between us shrinking with each passing second. I could feel his breath on my face, but the magic of this moment wasn't just in physical proximity, it was a reflection of the trust we had in each other and our willingness to share the weight of our secrets. Jack's hands slid gently down my back as he pulled me closer. My heart raced, and I realized he felt the same intensity. Without thinking, my hands moved to his chest. This simple motion felt like a confession, a silent acknowledgement that there was no turning back for us now. For hours we were lost in this closeness, but it wasn't just physical, it was a moment where our souls seemed to find a shared language. Every touch and every look lightened the burdens of our past, even if only a little. As Jack leaned toward me, he whispered, Emily, this bond we share, it reminds me of something I've forgotten, what it means to truly trust. The depth and his gaze reassured me once more that I was exactly where I was meant to be. That night I managed to move past Jack's protective walls, but I also began to understand why he clung so tightly to his secrets. Jack's embrace felt like he was letting go of all the emotions he had been holding inside for years. I could sense that in that moment I was helping him lighten the invisible burdens he carried on his shoulders. My heartbeat quickened in sync with his breathing as his fingers gently moved across my back. Every touch drew me closer to him. The purity and intensity of this moment seemed to transcend time. My hands moved slowly from his chest to his shoulders, and the warmth of his skin filled me with a deep sense of trust. Jack gently cued my face with both hands. When his eyes locked onto mine, the silence between us said everything. Emily, he said, his voice trembling yet full of determination, what we shared tonight isn't just an escape, it's something I haven't felt in years, a sense of hope. His words touched my heart. I moved closer to him and placed my hands on his face, whispering, Jack, you're not alone, and I won't let these secrets consume you. After I said that, I felt the distance between us completely dissolve. Jack leaned forward, resting his forehead against mine. That small but powerful gesture spoke volumes about what we were both feeling. In that instant, as his breath brushed against my face, I could sense the rhythm of his heartbeat. My hands slid gently from his shoulders to his neck, and Jack placed his hands firmly on my